Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to see in functions whether it is good to use print statements or returning the value, right? So this will be a contrast video between the print function and the return value, right? So let us move to our Visual Studio Code. Now, in order to demonstrate the difference between print and return, here I will be making a function which will be calculating the sum of elements of a list, right? And inside this, I will be taking my list as a parameter, right? So what this function is going to do, you can write a docstring. Now this function will calculate the sum of elements of a list, right? So my list is the list of whose elements I want to calculate the sum of, right? So for this, I will be initializing s is equals to 0. So you can write any type of, Python code inside a function. Here I will be using a for loop for I in my list, right? And what I will be doing is s is equals to s plus I, because every single time that particular value will be i's loop variable value will be equal to the elements of the list. And now what I'm going to do over here is I will be printing the value of s, which is the sum. So let me write the complete statement. The sum is colon and comma s, right? So now what I have done, I have made a simple function which is calculating the sum of elements of a list, right? If I run this statement like this only, you can see that nothing happens on your terminal. That means you do not get anything out of this function, because we have just written the definition of the function, but we haven't called it yet. In order to execute a function, we need to call it. And why a function is callable? Because it has a dunder method inside it which is named as call, right? So let me just call this function. So I will be calling the name of my function, that is sum of elements, and as the parameter this time I will be giving a list which is having first 5 natural numbers, right? Now let me just run this code and you can see the sum is 15 is printed on your screen, right? So now that is somewhat working very fine. I wanted to calculate the sum of the elements and I got answer as 15, right? But now what happens if I want to actually calculate mean of the numbers, right? If I want to calculate the mean of the elements that are present in this inside the list. So for that, let me call mean over here, and I want 15 as the sum divided by the length, right? So in order to get 15, what I have to do is I have to call this function again. Remember, now I'm calling this function again with the same input, right? And then I shall be actually doing is, which is my length is equal to, again, like this, right? And in order to check whether it's working very fine or not, I have to print the value of mean. And if I run the code, you can see that what has happened over here is we got an error, right? Let me just clear the screen and run this code again and tell you what exactly the error is. What I got over here is when I called this function, right, this first function, I got the function get called and the value, the sum is printed as 15, right? But here when I calculated mean is equals to the sum of this value and the length value of this, right? At that point of time, this function is called again and the sum is 15 is again printed, right? And the error says this is a type error which is this is unsupported operand type. This is none divided by integer. Now the question arises that this function is giving answer as 15. Why this traceback is telling that it is type none? Why it is coming out to be type none, right? So actually what is the issue with this particular code is, here I have used the print statement, this statement, to actually get the sum of the list. Now, if I want the answer 15 outside the scope of my function, then that is not possible. Because if I call this function again, because mean is the sum of the list divided by the total elements, right? So when I called this sum of elements again over here, that given me an answer that sum of element function is returning none, right? So what is none is an object in Python, right? So none is a certified object in Python, right? So what it is returning? It is returning none because I haven't used return statement in this function. So what we have to do over here? Let me just comment this statement, the print statement, right? And in place of this print statement inside my function, let me use return. And what I want to return? I want to return S, right? And now in order to call this function, let me just make another variable, say sum new maybe is equal to this, and in order to print the sum, now I will be using the print statement and writing the sum is, and here in place of s this time I will be writing sum new, right? And let me just comment these two statements also. And now if I run the code, then you can see that sum is 15 is printed as it was in the previous example, right? And now let me just uncomment this statement, and in place of this, what I will be using? I will be using sum underscore new, right? You can also create a new function which calculates the length, but length is an inbuilt function, so that is not an issue. But over here, remember that the value of s, when it is returned, it gets out of the scope of the function, right? And we can use it anywhere in our program. We can calculate anything over it, right? So now let me run this code again. And on running this code, you can see that this time the mean is printed as it is. So remember one thing, if the function does not contain a return statement, that is explicitly if we do not write return in it, then the function by default return a none value, and none is an object in Python. And we can use return statement to get the result out of the scope of the function and use it again and again. So with this explanation, it is very clear that according to the requirement, we can make use of the print function as well as the return statement, right? But it is not that we cannot use print statement inside a function. Let me make a print statement and say this function calculate the sum, right? And if I now run this code, you can see that this function calculate sum is printing over here. So yes, we can use print statement inside the functions wherever we want, but returning the value has its own significance. So I hope that you understood the the working of using print function and return statement inside a function. And thanks for watching the video. And if you like it, please don't forget to subscribe my channel. Thank you.